Okay, thank you. All right, let's reconvene this briefing. So we move on to project update. Now, a recap from the March briefing, we've got Catherine Overwater and Michael Day presenting this item. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll start. So briefly what we're covering in the open session of the district plan briefing today is a quick update of the project, talk about timetable for preparing our draft district plan, briefly recap some of the key points from the March briefing, and then we'll talk about the tangata whenua process chapter, notable trees, and then designations. Next slide, please, Catherine. Just like to briefly talk about the resource management reforms and the latest advice we've got from the Ministry for the Environment. So as we all know, the MFE is in the process of reforming the Resource Management Act system in the country. We've just reached out to them to talk about their timeframes, and they firstly, the Select Committee report is due late June this year. They are still expecting to bring in the new system this side of the central government elections. That is what their promise is. We wait to see if that's going to happen or not. But the key point here is their advice is it's going to take 7 to 10 years to fully transition into the new system, right? So that's the Natural and Built Environments Act system. In the Planning Act. And the Resource Management Act framework will remain in place whilst regions transition into the new system, and that there's no imminent risk to existing council planning processes under the RMA while we transition into the new system. Next slide, please, Catherine. So on the basis of that, the planning team have evaluated options for elected members to consider with regards to whether we should carry on with our district plan review as scheduled, whether we should take a bit more time on our district plan review, whether we should stop the district plan review and undertake a plan change, a growth-specific plan change to the operative district plan, or to stop everything and don't do anything. There's a whole lot of detailed analysis of that at attachment A. I'm not going to speak point by point to that. Staff's recommendation is that we do carry on with district plan review as scheduled, but we would appreciate the opportunity right now for elected members to discuss this, to give us your feedback, because the key point here is you all have to be in this journey together. It's really important that we're all singing from the same page here, and so I'd like us to have a discussion at this stage, because this new plan will be the elected members' plan. So we can have a discussion about this. That would be helpful.
Okay.
Michael, I have a question that I sent in earlier, just wanting to clarify if option 3 would still cover our requirement to review the district plan every 10 years.
I technically no, it wouldn't. But notwithstanding that, in reality, there is no real mechanisms for MFE to, apart from telling us you should do this, there's no mechanism for them to realistically force us to. Apart from, it may not be the best look for council, but
right.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
In, option one,
Yes.
talk about, the submission period will run for approximately 2 months until November 23. From there, the district planning team would need to summarise submissions and work towards releasing a summary of submissions.
Yes, Your Worship.
At that timescale there, if you took it to option 3, is the timescale relatively the same?
You mean, Your Worship?
Or if you, for notification submissions, and the time involved to work through them, etc.
Sure. So what we've done here is we've basically worked forward from assuming that we notify the plan in September of this year. That would start the formal statutory RMA Schedule 1 process. And similarly, if we were to notify a plan change to the operative district plan in September, that will start the formal RMA Schedule 1 process as well. So yes, to answer that, that's a long-winded way of saying yes, that would have to go through the same statutory process.
Okay.
Could I just get clarification on a matter?
Sure.
Now this is, because, you know, I'm supposed to be the process guy. How much I might be criticised for it. I just want to clarify that standing orders don't apply to this format of meeting. Is that correct?
Sorry.
No, it does not. We'll just have a process where I will conduct it with hands up, first in line.
We're having a discussion rather than the formal questions part and then a statements part,
That's right. It's unlike a,
because we're not actually going to make a vote.
that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, councillor Lambeth.
Yes, once again, I heard this threat to reputation again, if we go by option 3. Can you please explain a little bit more about this threat to reputation? Because the way I see it, the general public want us to get something effective within the budget that is going to work. Could you, because you're bringing this up all the time, a threat to reputation, could you please explain a little bit more about that?
So through the chair, it's more about council have been reviewing the district plan for several years now. We are 90% through the process of having a notified district plan. There was a draft district plan put out for public feedback last year, which we received a whole lot of feedback on. The vast majority of feedback was very positive. So there's an expectation amongst the community that council will put forward this new district plan. And so I suppose the reputational risk is more about a potential unease with some members of the community who are invested in the process or who may expect council to carry on with the full district plan review.
Thank you.
Councillor Aaron, comments?
I just wanted to, thank you for remembering me. I'd forgotten. I wanted to just clarify the mayor's question about the time frame. So option 3 would that give us a result quicker than the reviewing the entire district plan?
So through the chair, it's really difficult to honestly answer that because it would depend on the nature and scale of the proposed private plan change to the operative district plan. We would then need to ensure that the operative district plan gets updated into the National Planning Standard template as well, and so that would take time and effort as well. It would also depend on the number of submitters, the nature of submissions, how litigious or vexatious they may or may not be, how much legal support we would need. So it's very tricky to answer that, honestly.
No, I understand.
Councillor. Councillor Williams.
I just wonder between option 1 and option 3, with option 3, would there be considerably less costs or than option 1 going forward, in your opinion?
Again, really, really hard to say because it goes to the scale of the private land change, how large it may or may not be, and then how much, how many submitters we get, the scale of the submissions, how much legal support we need as well. It may be, it may not be. Look, that's a really unhelpful answer, but I don't know. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, so I'm hearing your answers to the first two questions, and I'm looking at the benefits. As a benchmark, it will cost less to carry out this process as a benchmark, but you're saying that it has the potential to escalate the cost depending on a number of variable factors that are unknown. Is that correct? So it will, as a matter of process, reduce the costs?
Doing a plan change, it may well do in simple terms, absolutely.
And then the factors, the submitters, litigious, vexatious, etc., which is unknown, would push the costs up. Are there any other councils comparative with Kaipara District Council who have gone down this process, or is there any way for us to look at what that unknown may potentially look like in terms of similar communities?
So in the Northland context, Chair, Far North District Council notified their new district plan last year, and they're going through their full notification process. Whangai District Council for the past 15 odd years has been in the process of a rolling review to the operative district plan, where they've done 100 odd plan changes and have kept rolling it. There are pros and cons of that. It does cost more, and it does mean that you're always updating a part of the plan, and you may have a part of the plan that's some 10, 15 years old, where you've got one part that's new as well. So in my opinion, that's not the best way to do things.
And then the second question that I have, so with option 3, do you agree gives councillors the greatest input into the priority areas for it, if we go with option 3? Is that the greatest input councillors have is through the plan change? Do you agree with that?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, because what we're trying to do here is to have monthly briefings with elected members to step through all facets of the new plan, so that elected members have full ownership of the plan. In the workshop sessions that we've been doing, we've been going over the district and identifying areas for further growth and stuff as well. Notwithstanding that, and depending on the scale and nature of a plan change to the operative district plan, then of course elected members will have full discretion on the scale and nature of that private plan change as well.
So arguably, we do have the greatest input into option 3.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay, so if we do go with option 3, would it not, would a countervailing factor not be that if councillors arguably do have the greatest input, then there's less likely to be litigation because we understand the needs of the district and the community.
I wouldn't necessarily say that either, because it, like I said, it depends on the scale of the plan change that we promulgate. It depends what looks like the operative district plan as well. And if, for example, it's a plan change to identify areas solely for rezoning, then we'd probably run the risk of the people saying, you rezoned my neighbour, what about me? What about me as well? And so there'll always be people who aren't happy with the process as well. So
So I'll just finalise by making a statement that it's already 80% of the way through, so we already have all of the work to date to inform if we were to go with option 3. So it's not like elected members would be starting from scratch. We still have all of that information and can then use that to inform and have a greater input into this, because, you know, you talk about coming back to briefings and stepping us through everything. But my experience is that a lot of it is led by council staff, and there's very limited options that are
absolutely
put to us. And
so certainly council staff are experts in this space, and our job is to bring material to elected members for direction. We don't expect you to write the whole district plan or write the plan change. It's about the elected members being comfortable with the level of travel and level of direction. So
yeah, it's just hard to take ownership of, like what you've described. It's hard to take ownership of as elected members. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
So under all scenarios, this is the problem we have, of course, you don't have a crystal ball, none of us have. Under all scenarios, we will probably receive a level of appeals.
100% guaranteed. 100% guaranteed.
Right, okay. Councillor. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Your Worship, I know that Councillor Vincent's been trying to speak. I didn't really speak.
Oh, I am sorry, look, we'll have.
Speak as well, and it's difficult getting out.
Who's going to go first, you?
Well, I think that
Councillor Vincent, Councillor Naya, and then Councillor Larson. Okay.
I don't have any particular, I mean, just-
And Mr Mayor, sorry, I've been waving my hand too.
Okay, well, we'll make you number 4. Okay, let's go.
Oh, thanks.
Firstly, back to the reputational question, I've deferred to Ella Fitzgerald, who said, first you say you do and then you don't, and then you say you will and then you won't. You're undecided now, so what you're going to do? And so it goes on. So that's the impact on our reputation, I guess, by changing horses midstream, to mix our metaphors. I guess, would you say, I'll have a question for you, Michael, that one of the challenges in completing this district plan process is that it's difficult to complete it within a single term of council, because like a lot of the work that's been done has been done by different elected members who are no longer sitting around the table. And so that's where we've got the situation of entering in now, when just as like with the long-term plans, the new council coming in has to live with the existing long-term plan until it's changed by the new council. So what's your thought on that?
Through the chair, that's a very good point, Councillor Vincent. And yes, the draft plan that was put out last year was put out under the guidance of the previous council. Notwithstanding that, developing a new plan, like a plan change, is a complex iterative process, and we are very cognizant that the plan that's going out now needs to be owned by this set of elected members, and we are trying to adjust to the direction that these elected members are giving us as staff. And if you see some of the material later on agenda, I think you'll see that we are in the direction of travel that this council has asked us to do.
Thank you. Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm looking at the options, and I noticed that everyone is talking about the option 1 or option 3, and they're scared to look at option 2. I guess what the point Mark Vincent, Councillor Mark Vincent made is about the fact that the previous draft plan and the time we took is not the elected members around the table today. So why don't we look at, and can you elucidate, please, Michael, what do you mean by develop and testing provisions for this district plan review now, when you have spent years on it? I hope I made myself clear, Michael, or shall I repeat?
I'm not, so the Chair, I'm not too sure what you mean.
So what I mean is, in terms of elucidating more on option 2, rather than putting a deadline of September 23 on option 1 and 3, which gives us limited time, while the previous draft plan and the years spent on that was within different council, right? And we are looking to make changes. But so option 2 looks like the thing which allows more time. And then you mentioned develop and test provisions. So which means you want to test the options as we go. Because option 1, if we look at, you are talking about as the best option for upcoming, and they are not upcoming. You told me they are 7 to 10 years away. So why we are looking at option 1 or 3 with a deadline of 3-4 months to come out with something for the public, whilst that whole scheme of things has been done by the previous council, as Councillor Vincent pointed out.
Right, so through the Chair, yes, option 2 would allow us to, when we say test the provisions, what that means is, for example, we could go and talk to farming groups, rural communities, I'll just say some names here, your federated farmers, about specific provisions that may or may not impact farmers. It might allow us to talk with district councils more. For example, test the new provisions with stakeholders prior to public notification of the new plan. But just remember that until a plan is actually notified, it's still just a draft plan as well. So yes, we could take more time, Councillor Nair. We are in a position to be able to notify in September if this council wants to do that, and to actually just get stuck into it and start that formal Schedule 1 process. But yes, of course, we could take more time.
Thank you.
Councillor Manderson.
In looking at this report, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to be that it deals with the costs to council and not with the costs to the community. These reports are progressively more and more restrictive, and they are restrictive at the same time on output. I speak to a considerable number of farmers that have already decided that the amount of red tape, for want of a better word, is putting them off even continuing in farming. The same is in many of these other things where the legislation actually acts to keep the market out of the process. And it has extensively surveyed the people in the planning process. I think the important thing for us is that we should be growing Kaipara. And I don't know that any one of these is actually looking at the right thing, which is simply the difference between 1.5 and 0.8 million, oh, sorry, 0.5 million cost to council. What is the cost to the community? What surveys have we taken, if any, of the participants in these various activities as to what they want most? I'd ask that.
A statement or a?
Whatever. I think that was a question.
You was summing it up by saying what activities have we undertaken to survey the people that are most affected?
Sure. I mean, so through the chair, the district plan review has been in process for several years now. A couple of years ago, we put out issues and options documentation, got good feedback from the community. We put out a draft district plan last year and got good feedback from the community. We've engaged quite heavily with sector groups, members of the public, so far, acknowledging that it's still part of a draft process to date. It's not a formal process. The team very cognizant of looking to make an enabling plan, direction that this council would set us, and we're pushing hard to try and do that.
Catherine, would you like to make a comment there, please?
In addition to what Michael was saying there, and just to give elected members a bit of peace of mind that we as a team, you know, when we did our consultation on the draft district plan in September last year, we took it to the communities. We did a lot of online engagement because of some people were a bit cautious about coming out to public events, given COVID, etc. But we've talked to the individual landowners right up to the organisation, Federated Farmers, Horticulture New Zealand, all those big players. And we received a lot more feedback than we anticipated with the draft district plan. Usually councils don't get a lot of feedback on a draft. So we were pleasantly surprised by how much input we got. And that's what's being used now to inform elected members of our way forward, whether we mark or didn't hit the mark with the provisions that we're proposing. So we feel that that was a really big part that the community played in our district plan process. So I just wanted to make that point, Your Worship.
Councillor Larson.
I just wonder
sorry,
whether Councillor Howard was trying to speak and has had difficulty getting through to you because of his honesty.
Okay, Councillor Howard, you had a question up there. Can you come in?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, my isolation isn't helping. Thank you all for the presentations and the information. And I go back to, Michael, to your very early comments in this section about referencing that we are ideally as a team fully together in working through this. And I have to say, I certainly have that same objective. I think, though, that we have, as elected members, have made it relatively, let me start again. I think you've quite comprehensively talked about how we did the review last year, or the then council did the review. And I think a lot of things have happened since then. You know, we didn't have, as I recall anyway, the release of the new proposed legislations and particularly RMA and how that's going to fold out at that time. And that has been the major factor behind the desire of elected members now to change, slow down, make smaller steps. And I actually think that the community would commend us, not apply any reputational damage, by taking a much more cautious approach and minimal changes relative to the cost impacts. And we've also established in discussions the potential for a total rewrite again once these legislations, new legislations, are enacted. So I feel sure that the community would be very supportive of the stance that we're trying to take. And I'm not seeing, I guess I'll phrase it in a question, what elements are the executive providing that help us to understand how our proposed solutions could come to life? You know, it may not be your ideal, but you know, it's what we've expressed is the direction we'd like to take, we think, responsibly. So where are the solutions, you know, the options that you could see that we could work together on to fulfill our desire here?
So, through the chair, as I touched on before, it's an iterative process to develop a new district plan, and the team, I believe the team is hearing the feedback from elected members each briefing, each workshop, and is trying to adjust accordingly. And whilst this is an open session now, and I can't talk about what we are planning on talking about this afternoon in the workshop session, see that staff are trying really hard to adjust to the direction that the elected members are giving us. Notwithstanding that, and I think we're all clear here, that ultimately this table sets the direction for council. And so if your collective view is that you want to press pause on the current process, then procedurally we would need to take a paper to an upcoming council meeting to get a formal decision on that and then adjust accordingly.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Lambeth.
Yes, just quickly, I don't know if you're aware, but the district plan was released, or the proposed district plan was released a day and a half before nominations closed for election for us elected members. And that day and a half, a lot of things happened in my office, not only from the building industry, but also from the farming industry. The farmers are really, really concerned about how it's going to affect the day-to-day running of their operation. I just last week was at a meeting with the Terminal Growers Association, and they are really, really concerned about the new rural zone and how it's going to affect them. They turn their land twice a year, if not 3 times a year, not only to crop, but to harvest, and then also put it back into grass for the sheep to graze it off. They can see a massive amount of absolute tsunami of red tape coming for them, which is going to make it very difficult. They do not want the new district plan, and they want the rural zone to stay as it is and to carry on. My question to you is, how robust was that feedback? Were you considering everything, or was it just solely by the internet that you got your feedback from? Because there are other aspects of feedback, and it's just me being here, basically representing things.
Through the chair, I'll let Catherine speak to that. She led that.
Yeah, so Councillor Lambeth, I am surprised to hear that there's concerns coming through your channels, because we have had discussions with Federated Farmers and Hort New Zealand. Both have prepared fairly comprehensive feedback, which we're taking into account. And in summary, they seem to be well in support of the rural production zone to protect their activities, and differentiating the 2 rural zones. So, I mean, I'm not sure where the communication's being lost between their hierarchy in terms of how they prepare their feedback, but they'll be one of the key players, obviously, in the process. And I'd be keen to hear some examples of what red tape they're talking about specifically in terms of the district plan rules when we developed this plan with the previous council and elected members to try and make things more enabling. And obviously we can talk about land use, or we can talk about subdivision. And we've been trying to provide as much enablement in this new plan as we could do. Obviously there's limitations now with the changes in terms of central government putting out the new highly productive land national policy statement, which has changed the game for every council across the country, not just Kaipara. But yeah, I'm just a little bit surprised to hear that you're hearing one story and we're hearing a different story. We're not just grabbing stuff off the internet, but we are taking the feedback really seriously, because these people, if we don't appease some of their concerns, we will end up in court against them later on. And we don't want that. We want to alleviate any risk to council. So it's in our best interest to work with these guys, not against them.
So the main concern was in the turning of the land, ploughing the land every 3 times a year?
So earthwork provision?
Yes.
Yep.
And the red tape was involved with that, to do that?
Just in that context, Councillor Lambeth, remember the regional council have a role to play here as well. And what we've tried to do with our district plan is align the earthwork rules with the regional council's rules so that there weren't duplicate processes and things like that. And there's a lot of feedback on the earthwork rules, which we've been working through. So yeah, I'm just, so if there's other examples that you have, I'd be really keen to hear what they are, so that we can make sure that we're doing the best job we can, because we don't want it to be the case where people are, you know, thinking that the new district plan is going to be really cutting them off at the knees, if you like.
Okay, I'll have Councillor Manderson followed by Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Your Honour. I think the major problem we've got here is that who asks the questions? If you want a desired answer, you phrase the question to get that answer. And I think there's all sorts of people in many activities in the country that don't realise the extent to which they control the dialogue. You've isolated the market from this. There's few people with skin in the game that are actually making decisions. Autocratic people in all countries, their first activity to stay in power is to isolate the entities that might come and restore a democracy or a system of control. We have now, with the planning processes, whether it's the dairy industry, federated farmers, whether it's our planning activities, etc., we've taken control away from the people with skin in the game. We've got to get them back in making decisions at the coalface. We've actually isolated these people from the decision makings. We produce untold reports that are all reports with the council's cost, the council's activity. We should be looking at the ratepayers, the farmers, etc. We've recently had a government that's filled our Northland with all sorts of pine trees. And yet I believe at the moment China's going down. What a hell of a problem we might have in the future with Northland largely in pine trees and no longer that market for them. We're doing the same with our dairy industry. You've only got to drive around the roads at the moment and you can see untold numbers of old cow sheds, but some of them not too old. Even down here at Mathatai, a relatively new herringbone shed that have gone out of dairying and they've just gone into dry stock. I think you've got to think a lot more about the participants.
Thank you, Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I mean, I sort of spent too much time on this, but I kind of like to traverse some of the points that have already been raised. I just want to go back to the point on page 19 of the agenda regarding benefits of proceeding option 1. And what it says here is avoids potential reputational risk. Carry on with the PDP. And, you know, I think we need to understand the situation that we find ourselves. There has been, at a local level, change of government. And in the central government context, when you change from a Labour Green coalition to let's say an Act to the Killicuddy Series Coalition, or whatever you want to call it.
Relevant, yes.
The constituents are going to expect change in policy direction, almost certainly. And so we're working on a situation. There's been a change. And I would say the matter around reputational risks is kind of there's more reputational risk with a program of work that can't put your hand on your heart and say you support, or is there more reputational risk going the other way? So I'll say, you know, I understand your position as well, Michael, in terms of some of the questions. The answer is really, it depends. And so in the context of option 1 versus option 3 or whatever, if you have a simple plan change and you cut out as much complication as possible and you eliminate zoning changes on the properties of people that don't want their land rezoned, maybe you do have a much simpler and more stringent approach. Of course, the proposed plan process, not without zoning changes, it is full of enormous amounts of zoning changes. A simpler process, maybe simpler, but have a lot less people affected by rezoning. In terms of the consultation process that we've been through, I kind of concur with Councillor Manderson's point. You know, so it depends on the questions that you ask. Go out and say to people, you know, so do you want 12 hectare lots, or would you rather have 20 hectare lots? And that's the strength of the question. It's quite hard to come back with something entirely different. I mean, I've been this review process it's been, and maybe might be reflection on me, but I'm only just really getting my head around the nitty gritty of this plan and its various complications. And I don't know what the number of pages was. It was about 450 pages or something, a huge document, the text, let alone all of the maps. And so, having gone through consultation through a period of extraordinary difficulty for people with the whole COVID impact on people's businesses, I think people have just been struggling to survive on the ground, and who really has the time, ability as a common ratepayer to go through all of that material and really crystallise what the issues might be. And that comes to the point that Councillor Lambert has made about the Coomera growers. You know, they're trying to survive out there. They're going through really tough times. If they've got the time at the end of the day, and they're worn out from trying to keep their farms in order, especially with all this weather, to really engage in the process, read all that material, let alone look at all the maps to figure out how the multiple layers of regulation are going to affect them. And so, you know, we come back about federated farmers saying it's all good. Well, yeah, we have this difficulty with these representative bodies actually managing to really be the true voice of those communities that are under pressure and can't come up to speed with it themselves. They probably can speak to the general people across the country, but actually how much in-depth analysis they've done as well into what their members actually want. Very hard for them to do that. Very hard for them to get information from their members. So, yeah, I think we've got to be quite open-minded about the process going forward. I mean, we come to let's make our costs on pages 27. Probably spend half an hour going through those points, so I won't put you through that now, but kind of comes back a little bit to words in Michael's mouth, but it sort of depends. Come up with a simple and streamlined process for an option 3, maybe that's a good way for us. But if you don't, then, you know, I guess it creates some uncertainty, not that it probably isn't an equal amount of uncertainty in going through a comprehensive process. I just would come to one of those points though, in that page 23, risks, and that point, 1, 2, 3, point 4, and it says that work to date indicates that the operative district plan not fit for purpose, achieve strategic outcomes for quite significant. There is a risk some of these provisions poor planning outcomes, and so I guess my rhetorical questions in relation to that are, how can we, we've only defined our strategic outcomes as a council, how can we be so sure that a plan can't meet those outcomes, or whether the new draft plan, proposed district plan, meets those outcomes as we came up with them after it was developed? And the second point is, you know, for planning outcomes, but I've never really managed to get to a documented understanding of what those poor outcomes are. And then I would also question, are they poor in terms of the strategic outcomes that we want to achieve, that we've only just documented ourselves? I don't need you to answer those, I'm just raising them as some rhetorical questions. Maybe come back with that later as in, what are those poor outcomes? And then we can see whether they actually are misaligned with what our strategic outcomes are. I've spoken for long enough. Thank you.
Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. It's been fascinating listening to the discussion this morning. I can hear the elected members, my colleagues on the one side, 7 new elected members. So yes, there's a change in direction needed, because where we are in this process was developed by the last term of elected members. So I can understand that. They want input. They want to have ownership of the district plan. On the other side, I can hear the staff asking for that input and asking for that direction. And so I kind of can't quite reconcile why we need to throw out the entire district plan or pause it when the staff are coming to every one of these briefings and taking on board the direction that they are being given. And they are asking for more information and more direction, and they are pivoting and changing and tweaking things, and it is coming out different to the previous term draft. I also kind of can't reconcile why we are so keen to stop a process that has cost so much so far, and that is a process that is meant to be fixing an operative district plan that we know is not fit for purpose. And I received that feedback from professionals who actually try to use it. I've been told this morning by one of our members around the table that developers are struggling with the planning processes in the operative district plan. So I'm just not reaching that place where I feel that we need to pause where we are and just do zoning. I don't think that just rezoning fixes everything. And if we're talking about reputational risk, I suppose where I think about reputational risk is if we stop the district plan and just do rezoning, who does that benefit? Because we've got so many professional people who can't work or don't like and are struggling with and have given feedback to us through our consultation that it doesn't work, yet rezoning isn't going to fix all those other issues. So I'm not at option 3 is probably what I want to say out loud at this point in time. And I think that some really, really interesting points have been made this morning, but I really hope that there's a way that we can actually continue to work on the district plan draft and keep pushing that forward with the direction and with the input from these elected members. You're only about 6 months into it. And so it may seem like a very fast process for you, but it's actually been years in the making. And the struggle, the real challenge, I guess, with government and changing governments and things like that is one of the criticism that you get, whether it's central government or local government, is that nothing gets done. And yes, that is because governments keep changing, people keep changing, and people want to put their own stamp on things. So when do we actually stand up as leaders in our district and get on with the job and produce something that works for our communities? That's what we're here for. So when does that decision get made? Or do we pause this one and then a new Kaipara District Council or no Kaipara District Council comes along and it all changes again, and we never actually push that envelope forward and get the job done? I understand the frustrations that I'm hearing, but I'm just as frustrated on the complete opposite side of the fence. Thank you.
Councillor Larson. Councillor Vincent.
No, you put your hand first.
Councillor Larson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pleased that static on the line's gone. It was quite up to you. Yeah, I don't see any point in falling into a sunk costs fallacy. You've spent money process. If you're happy with it, great. If you're not happy with it, I think I'd come around to the point that I was making before. It kind of depends. And a whole lot of information in this afternoon session that I haven't been through, and really my decision making relies on where that might land to some extent. If you get that right, maybe. If you don't get it right, then maybe not. So that's kind of where I'm landing. Pretty lunchtime as well.
Councillor Vincent.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, and I guess, yeah, I'd like to say I'm open to option one. However, yeah, that depends a bit on how the discussion goes this afternoon. One of the things, an observation I'd make from my many years involved with district plan stuff is that the general rule is that the last plan was rubbish and the new one is the best ever. Okay, just so you know. That's how it goes. Now, I would like to know from you, Michael, or Catherine, what the implications are. And I haven't read back through the summary of the implications of the options. The implications of the national planning standards and the national policy statement on highly productive land. Do they have a bearing on which would be a preferable option to pursue?
For the chair, briefly, and you can touch on afterwards, Catherine, if you want. The draft district plan is already in the national planning standard template, and so the proposed plan will be. The operative district plan is not. There's a mandatory requirement to have all plans in the national planning standard template by, I believe, 2024. So if we were to stop the full plan review and to do the plan change to the operative district plan, then we would have to retrofit our operative district plan into the national planning standards framework. That will take some time and some costs, but we can do that.
Is that something that would have to go through a public process, or you just?
No, it's
an administrative process.
Correct, it's administrative. The national policy statement for highly productive land, that's in play right now. So our consents team, for example, are grappling with the implications of that to the operative district plan right now. The commissioners on private plan change 81 are grappling with the implications of that right now. And of course, when we look to rezone land or consider rezoning land either through a plan change to the operative district plan or through the proposed plan, we'll have to grapple with that as well. That's on the table right now.
Just to clarify that latter point, then are we going to be required to make changes to the operative plan and to respect the requirements in that national policy statement on highly productive land anyway? Or is that something that at an operational level, dealing with applications, that would be taken into account?
Later.
Right, okay, thank you. Which means so the cost implications are negligible in terms of the difference between those two options as far as the national policy statement on highly productive land. Thank you.
Councillor Larson.
I just thought it might be useful for elected members to understand how an operative plan and proposed plan are addressed in the applicant once we've been notified. Got to as the process goes on, and just give us a quick explanation of that.
Yeah, yes, that's complicated. So when a new district plan is notified, some provisions have immediate legal effect, some don't. Policies have effect as well, and so in its simple terms, and it is very complicated, but in simple terms, the council consents team as well as applicants will be working with two plans as soon as the plan is notified, and when we get decisions on submissions in the proposed plan or a new plan, that stage some provisions of operative plan will cease to be in effect, and the new provisions will only apply, but it takes several years, and it is very complicated, Councillor Larson, to that point. Not easy.
I think Councillor Winston did a dance to explain that at one point. Would you like to do that again?
Put some music on. First you say you do and then you don't. Yeah. So what is the, from the, leading up to the proposed plan being notified, you're standing on 1 foot. And then you notify the new plan and you put your right foot just touching the ground, but without very much weight on it at all. And as you work through the process of receiving submissions makes no difference, but when you get to the point of decisions being made on submissions, and then you can attach a bit more weight to it. You can see that, well, it's likely that this provision, like the people assessing an application to do something, will then be having to take more weight, more of a view to the future. And then when you get to the point where there are no more appeals to be dealt with to those decisions on submissions and cross submissions, or even at the point where there were no submissions on that particular issue, at that point, then the regard for the operative plan is purely a matter of acknowledging it rather than actually attaching any weight to the decision made. And then the new plan is notified and you say goodbye to the old plan.
What the news is. Thank you. Councillor Manderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only one thing was overlooked there with the shuffle of the feet was the ratepayers are left to vote with their feet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the trouble is they're not, because they're stuck with us unless they leave.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I had a bit of trouble with the voice of Deputy Mayor for whatever reason, but I got most of it. I have listened to all others with great interest. So I don't know whether it's a question or a statement now at this juncture, but we are left with, it's a new council, we have to work together, right? So, and everyone has to look after the ratepayers. It's not about the process. So I concur with Councillor Ron Manderson in terms of that we are not listening to, we are just lost in the two processes. I would stick with my preference for option 2 in terms of we are the new government. We don't know whether it's green, blue, or red. In terms of what else is coming in few months, and we are trying to make decisions for ratepayers without knowing whether we will be able to put those things in effect. A little thing as national policy statement can put your district plan and operative plan to pieces. So I would say we should just test those provisions, develop and test provisions. Heavens won't fall in 3 months, but they may, depending on which government comes in. So that's my key on it. I think we have to work together. It's not whether the staff has worked. Yes, we appreciate the staff has worked very hard. And obviously, they do understand that with a different mindset and with the different preferences, there would be changes. But looking at it, the operative district plan or district plan, they work separately. So why don't we just put a little, not a pause, we carry on having the discussion. We should have more robust discussion with the people, the ratepayers. And as someone said, what you want to hear is what you want to pose the question. It's so right. So that's my 2 cents on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments while we move on?
Yeah, thanks. So, to the chair, it's been a useful discussion. I do think that we should move on to talk about the other topics. And what I'm hearing is maybe useful to have a further discussion amongst the elected member table at the end of the day and seek that direction of travel towards the end of the day afterward, canvass the other topics throughout today.
That would be useful. Thank you.
Let's proceed and try and make some time up. If we can, eh, guys? Catherine, go next slide, please.
All right.
Slide. Right. Briefly, what you see there is the proposed timeframe if we carry on with option 1. A key point being we'd look to take a paper to you in August to seek approval to notify the plan. I'm not going to dwell on this though. Go next slide, Catherine, please.
Yep.
Right. Be recap.
I could probably almost take this part as read. So to recap on the points raised by elected members in the March briefing, we talked about the lighting chapter, the temporary activities chapter, and there were some questions that came up around provisions for Kāori dieback and then the removal of vegetation. So I have put some responses in the report, so I'll take those as read. And if there's any questions following those, I'm happy to take those and we can continue working on any issues that you might have. So I'll put that on the table.
Going once, going twice. No. Yes.
Okay.
On.
Saves a bit of time. All right. Ty, do you want to come up and present on the Tangata Whenua process chapter, please?
So while Pāwhio up, I'll just briefly introduce this piece of work. So the Tangata Whenua Mana Whenua process chapter is a mandatory section under the National Planning Standards. The key point is that it is to include context and process related provisions only. It's not to have any rules in that. Any other rules that relate to Tangata Whenua, Mana Whenua are to be in other sections of the plan. So it's just how councils and community members Mana Whenua Tangata partners. Over to you two.
Tēnā koutou. So there's a number of sections under the RMA that require councils to acknowledge Tangata Whenua in their rohe. Mandatory direction is provided by the National Planning Standards, as you'll read up there. So the chapter can only provide context and related provisions. There are no rules or policies within this chapter. There are several iwi community authorities within the Kaipara district. So I'm not turning my head around all the time. Within the Kaipara district with areas of interest identified through settlement claims. We've been working closely with and collaboratively with our mana whenua partners, Te Reo Hau Settlement Trust and Te Rotoa Whatuora Trust. We've reached out to our other iwi authorities on the district's border. They would include Ngāti Manihiri and Te Kaweroa Maki. For input into the preparation of the Tangata Whenua chapter for the proposed district plan. Other iwi entities that have yet to settle their treaty claims have also been involved in the engagement process on input into this Tangata Whenua chapter. And we acknowledge that the timing of this work has been upset by the impacts of Cyclone Gabrielle for both council and our iwi authorities. This is a very draft chapter, what you see in the agenda, and there's still further work to do and further opportunities for amendment prior to the notification of the proposed district plan. We have a forward planning program to directly engage with iwi, hapu and marae and encourage both submissions, but also to avoid submissions, how the chapter can be drafted in order to be to satisfy the iwi authorities involved.
Any feedback? Discussion points?
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just was referring to in the original agenda paper, which is the draft wording, and you've got a map showing the location of the marae for the Te Reo Hau hapu. And I just wonder whether the numbers, are they intended to correspond in order to the list? So
that map is, no, they don't. That map is taken directly off the Te Reo Hau Settlement Trust site. And we're yet to finalise that map for district plan purposes. And these maps have been included in this draft to provide you, the councillors, with an overview of where that area of interest is. But these will not be the finalised maps, nor will that, and that would be consistent and aligned when presented in final vision.
the easy thing would be to change the order of the marae.
Yeah, so that it reads easily, and that will be done in the final vision.
Any further questions?
No further questions?
Doesn't appear to be. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor. Yeah. Yep.
Right, Betty, are you available online there?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. So I'll let you present on the notable trees if you would, and just try and keep it as streamlined as you can to make up time if that's all right.
That's fine. Do you just want to run through the, or before I do that, I'll introduce myself. Good morning, councillors. I'm Betty Connolly. I'm one of the planning team working on this. Catherine is just running through the PowerPoint for it. You have all of your everything in the report that you've done, so I won't reiterate anything, but I'm very happy to answer any questions that you may have. We've tried our best to get as many trees as we can, and we have a very robust process going for these to actual notification. So if there's any questions on either what I've written or the trees that have been nominated and the scores, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you. Councillor Larson.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Betty. I noticed in the report because we do have an enormous amount of pages here, just for brevity, I noticed there are a huge number of trees listed now, and clarify around are they mainly on public land or using them on private land now?
The majority of these are now on public land. There is an awful lot, as you will see, that have been identified around Mangawhai area. And the reason for that was that even though the arborist has been around other areas within the district, you know, your other harbour areas, he wasn't convinced, well, he didn't think that they met the standards, but what he was concerned about was the level of development that you could get at Mangawhai. So he is concerned about ensuring that Mangawhai trees do have that protection. So that's why you've got so many up in that area.
but the majority of them in the new plan are on public land use.
Okay, so I just don't understand the rationale around that, in that if they're on public land, then it's up to the council to decide whether they need to be approved or cut out. Where I'm saying they're at the government. What do you mean by that?
So council land is still subject to the RMA. Anything in the RMA is still, we still have to abide with on our own land. So that involves heritage buildings, trees, everything. So we have done the process of, and most of these aren't under reserves either. So we can't rely on Reserve Act process either. So we are basically just relying on the goodwill actually of council staff that these trees don't get damaged. But what we are doing is we are relying on the RMA, section 7, 7C and 7S, where we are, 7F, sorry, where we are to maintain and protect amenity values and also maintain and protect the environment. So that's the process, that's the legislation that sits behind notable trees.
Thank you for that, but it's not a prohibition on activity, is it? It's other matters.
Sorry, I can't actually, I didn't hear what you said, sorry.
It's section 7,
It doesn't say the council put all Rutakawa trees on council land in the list and protect them from any development, does it?
So can I just, through you, Your Worship, just, there was some legislation change a few years ago that stopped councils putting blanket protection on those. Yeah, so we can't do that. And I think it was actually Gordon Hoskins that initially raised the question about the protection of the Pūtaka at Mangawhai. So this was obviously in you know, reaction to his want to do better to protect those so that they can't just be cut down to build a toilet block or that kind of thing. Yeah, but they're not it's not a blanket protection.
Thank you, I understand that, and I will let you move on. The point I'm making is what the council is doing is it's imposing a restriction on development of its own land. Surely council can make its own mind up as it goes along without having to actually, anyway, carry on. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, and I guess then to continue on, and if that's sauce for the goose, then it'll be sauce for the gander. On page 45 of the agenda, as part of the schedule of trees, a bunch of them, you have a bunch of trees, that their STEM score is less than 130. And I would have, given that that's the threshold that's supposed to apply, could you clarify what purpose it serves to have them in the list? Okay,
I'm assuming you're referring to the trees at the noted as MAN 108 at Causeway, and you're also referring to the trees at Mangataroto?
Mangataroto I saw, yeah.
Okay, so there is also some at Mangawhai as well, at Causeway Church. If you look at the top of that, where that is, you'll see a group score, which has a group score of 168. Right. And yes, you are correct, there are trees underneath there that do not reach individual scoring of 130, but as a group, they reach 156. So that's why they've all been scheduled individually so that you can see each individual tree within that group. But the group score is 156, which is why they are included.
Okay, so that just to get a handle on that, so that as a group of trees, that's a relevant thing to be captured by the provisions in the RMA amendment that Catherine was referring to. Is that correct?
They are, but they have all been individually scored. We haven't just put a blanket protection over a group of trees. We have individually scored each one so that should something need to be done, each tree can be identified on its merits.
Yep. I'm most familiar with the Mangataroto ones. The grandkids around there from time to time, so, yep.
Councillor Penny Warren.
Through the chair, so there was a comment made that there's a large amount of trees included on here, but actually I'd suggest that we're lacking in the little area. I'm quite surprised that there's only 6 recorded here. Am I safe to assume that ones that are within reserves haven't been included on the list, or what's the?
Through your worship, I can probably answer that. So we were basically in the hands of the public in terms of nominations. So we put out some communications, get nominations from the public about the trees, and obviously tried to promote it through the work we were doing on the draft plan. We haven't done like an inventory of trees, like some councils will go out actively looking for trees to protect. And John has, in his travels, been looking for trees that he thinks are worthy of protection. But I guess the other thing is, back to Councillor Larson's question of public versus private land issue. And so it is easier for council to protect trees on public land versus private land. But we just don't have the budget to do a full district survey or survey of Dargle, for example. And so what the goal was to review what was in the operative district plan already, and there were only, a small number, and to try and enhance that where we could. So we've got a few extras now. But yeah, I guess if we got submissions through the plan and people were wanting to nominate and protect more trees, then they'll get assessed, same as what we've done, and included in the plan that way. But it's just how much time, how much time we've got to do that as well. So yeah, time and costs were a factor, Councillor Pennywater. Hopefully that answers the question.
Can I just quickly ask, of the private addresses there, which I'm not familiar with, but having several years ago undertaken a subdivision in Mangawai and cut down a Norfolk pine, and the town went mad. And then now we're doing a shared path where we seem to be cutting down much bigger, more beautiful Norfolk pines one after the other to accommodate the shared path. So there's 2 questions here. Have the people been consulted at those private properties that those trees are being identified?
Yes. Oh, Catherine, do you want to answer that?
Sorry, Betty, it's raining really heavy right here, so I don't know how well you can hear.
No, I don't. I do have a broken coverage, but yes, they have. The arborist has been on site on each one of those properties and assessed them. So yes, they do know. And we will be notifying them again before we go out for sending letters out before notification, advising them again.
My apologies for the weather, Betty, but I don't see there's any more questions that want to be asked. Yep, Councillor Manderson.
It's through you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just make a comment, you are to be congratulated. This has successfully held up a further plan of subdivision for an indeterminate amount of time. And you've not only held it up regards the tree, but you've also defined the root area for the area beyond the tree. I think that's quite commendable. Thank you.
The root area has been defined. It is best practice now in arboricultural terms. It has been defined, but within the rule, there are works that can go on, because of course the root area is very significant for the life of the tree. So that's why it has been defined. It's got a very complicated analysis and a calculation behind it. We haven't done that. We've left it to the arborist. And so that's how they've worked out what that root protection area is needed to protect that tree.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
Awesome. We've got a slight reprieve if we could maybe.
Right, thanks, Betty.
Thank you, Betty. Yeah.
Should we get Mr. Paul Vanders to try and briefly step us through designations, or collectively would the team want lunch first? We're in your hands.
Who'd like lunch first?
Fine.
Okay, 90 seconds, Paul. Look us for designations. All right, Paul.
Okay, keep going.
Please.
Let's go through it.
Yeah, this is the last item on the open agenda anyway, so might as well include that.
5 seconds.
You can run links on your music.
You just tell me when to.
Which one are we looking at, the first one or second? Designations.
Right, Paul, do you want to give the elected members a brief overview of designations and then step them through what we're doing here?
Thank you, councillors. The matters of designations are starting with your agenda on page 52. Now, in November, one of the first meetings that the new council had a briefing on, the matters of requiring authorities and designations were explained. I'm not going to repeat that, but the Kaipara district designations were not available at that point in time, so we're mainly going to concentrate on those particular matters. Secondly, just remember that notice of requirement or designations are spot zonings. They allow the use of the land for particular works, that is important, and can be different from the district plan zonings. Can I go to slide 2? Okay, yes, that's the one.
That's one, yeah.
Right, requiring authorities and consenting authorities is two different things. Council is a consenting authority, but council is also a requiring authority. In this particular case, the general manager, Mr. Ananama, is the delegate of council as the requiring authority. Today, we sit here as council as consenting authority to give us guidance on the designations. The third, then we have various of these requiring authorities, which we discussed last time as well, which is then Channel Terminal Services Limited, which is the petroleum pipeline through our district, the gas pipeline plus its connection to the Mangaroto milk dairy works, Kaipara District Council, Kiwi Rail Holdings Limited, the Minister of Courts, that used to be the Minister of Justice, it's now Minister of Courts, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Police, New Zealand Transport Agency, and we will still be debating if that goes down to a W of Wakakotai or that it remains as New Zealand Transport Agency. That is what it is presently in the Act. North Power Limited, and we'll have a particular question on that one at the end, and then Transpower New Zealand. Those are the requiring authorities that we have been looking at. Slide 3. This is the main slide of the presentation. Now, it's an attachment to D. The full report is in attachment D. We, as the consenting authority, have sent all the proposed and have had correspondence with all the requiring authorities, that whole list that you have seen. And from there on, we looked at the operative plan. There are 66 designations in the operative plan. Most of them are just rolled over without any changes. The Education Department has got some changes, especially where they sold the schoolhouse and it's now not designated anymore, or they have expanded their school area. We're not going to go through those at this particular point in time. Slide 4. Right, there are certain designations that have been removed with the discussion of the requiring authority. The first one is the Minister for Education. They don't need that particular site anymore. Next one.
Sorry, question. What's that site?
That was a site of education, training.
Is that not Unitec? That's still a extension of?
It's not Minister of Education. They have requested that it be.
Is that their request, not council?
So through the chair, on the operative district plan, that is the designation, as you currently see there. The team have been in touch via email correspondence with every single one of the designators in the operative district plan as per our requirements, and we've said, do you want your designation to be rolled over as is? Do you want it to be rolled over with modification or removed? And so Ministry of Education have said, we want this one removed from the plan, please. So that's
Is that, what's the, yeah, because that's Nortec/Unitec. The question, the reason why I have that question is that, I understand, and I'm not too sure whether it's this building, but I understand that there are, Ministry of Education buildings in that vicinity that have first right of refusals on them for, under the Te Roroa settlement. But I'm not too sure whether that's included. So whether that would trigger, like, have they sold the property? Where would that mean that down the track, if it is sold, that it wouldn't come within that right of first refusal because it's no longer designated?
You would have the letter from.
Like what the reason is, because I know that that is still Unitec, why they would be wanting
It
to remove
does
it.
not fall under the Ministry of Education.
Still is an education facility.
Yes, but it is.
Yeah.
Chair, process wise, my team have contacted all the existing designators in the plan and said what I've just said. They've come back to us and have said, we do not want this site to be designated. That's all that we can say at the moment.
Can I, is it okay to have information on that or no?
I probably have a letter from Minister.
Follow up on that.
We can get information if that's.
Yeah,
I don't know if it says anything about this.
Education institution operating for public good, but it's not under the Ministry of Education, so it doesn't need to be designated.
Yeah, I do understand that distinction.
Councillor
So it's not a change of title, it's just a change of designation, and it means that the Ministry of Education can build buildings there without having to go through the council, is that correct?
Yes.
If it's designated.
It is designated.
Yes, yes. Now, if it's taken off the designation, not a change of title, but if they wanted to put an extra building there, then they'd have to go through the consenting process like
that. District plan.
Okay, cool.
They always have to go through the building consent process.
With you, Paul.
Next one.
May I ask, just might colour further things going through too, or, okay, I'll start, so I'll continue if that's all right, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, continue.
Thank you. So what are the implications, like I'm just holding up the option of going down the plan change path as opposed to completing the district plan review. Where are we at with these designations? What problems could arise if they are not updated through the, if we're just doing a plan change at this particular point in time?
The underlying zoning will determine what type of land use would be allowed there, because every designation has a underlying zoning. So that underlying zoning will determine what activity is allowed on that particular property.
So are we likely to be receiving a cluster of designation notices, well, notices of requirement in the absence of us completing the district plan review?
No, well, if there is a requiring authority that have bought or that has now ownership of that land, they might apply for a designation.
So what I'm taking from that is that it's not a biggie either way in relation to the option of pursuing a plan change approach as opposed to completing the district.
The answer to your question is that the education department made also proposals on the rest of the zonings of properties that are not designated and said that there should be the opportunity to have educational activities on a, say, business property or residential property. On the zoning, the submission that we have to consider. Thank you.
Through your worship, though, I think just to help clarify, because you were asking about all of the designations, not just this one. And I think if we leave them out of a plan change option, then it would be still, if they've requested to update or amend, we'd have to do that to the operative district plan as part of our BAU anyway. This is just a comprehensive way of doing it all in the review. So we've, because we're reviewing the whole plan, we've asked all of the requiring authorities what they'd like to do. But if we didn't proceed with a change that included this process, then they would just stay in the operative district plan at the moment, and then it would be subject to us having to update the plan request. So
it's not I don't see it's a biggie either way.
yeah.
Councillor Peniora?
Through the chair, how difficult is it to turn land and back into, to put it back on other pieces? Because you've talked about the comprehensive application to designate education and then education, is that?
Yeah, so it is a process to put the designation on. So they have to go through what's called a notice of requirement. So it's like a resource consent council, and it goes through the RMA legislation to do that. So that would have to happen to redesignate the land. And so to remove it, they apply to council, and we go through, is it appropriate? Yes. And so doing this as part of the district plan means that we can kind of deal with everybody that wants to do the same thing at the same time, and then submissions kind of pick up any issues along the way. Otherwise, we have to do it individually designation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I'm just some observations. I've looked at all the other designations, which are fine because they never came to fruition or they've ceased completely. This one stands out for me for the mere fact that it is still, to my knowledge, an education facility, albeit it's through tertiary education as opposed to secondary school education, and that is the perfect facility to be expanded in the future for educational purposes, in addition to what's already occurring there. So I just wonder why this is slipping into this process when it should have its own private sort of plan change. If it has been sold, because someone had mentioned that it might have been sold, then is that not for the new owners to go through a private plan change?
Not private plan change, but yeah.
A resource
A
consent.
resource consent process, so removal through the RMA process, so that.
But yeah, what I'm saying is it's not technically an application from the Ministry of Education, is it? If they've already sold the land and the new developer or whoever's purchased it is actually coming through a process that's for, yeah. I mean, that's why I'd love to get some more information on this one, because it just sticks out to me as.
We can come back to you on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, the second one is the, which used to be the Minister of Defence. That was uplifted many years ago. It was never taken out of the district plan. So we want to remove that one. The next few of them are all, the next one is the fire station, fire service in Ruawai. It's actually a property owned by council and it is next to the fire station. The fire services fence is not a requiring authority. And so they are happy that that particular application or that particular designation be removed from the district plan and it goes to its normal zoning. The next one is the community hall and a swimming pool, and we have incorporated that as open space rather than designate that particular area. You can do more in the open spaces zone than what it was designated for. So the suggestion is that that be removed. The next few are actually service lanes, which our roading department is not going to build or maintain. The first one is in Kaiwaka. The second one is the next ones are all in Dargaville, service lanes in Dargaville, which are not going to be bought or maintained by roading. That to be taken out, that's D31.
I have a question there.
Councillor Lambert?
Who is going to maintain?
That will be between the landowners. In that particular, say in 31, there are several landowners, and council is also part landowner of a portion of a road. But that maintenance would be as it is presently amongst the landowners that have got either a easement or a agreement for that particular aspect. But KDC roading department is not going to maintain that particular.
I have huge concerns about this. You're looking at a cooperation between probably about 15 or 16 different business owners, another 15 or property owners, another 15 or 16 or more just for one of these lanes, tenants, and now you're going to throw your hands up and say it's all your problem.
No, we're just removing the designation. We can still solve any of the maintenance issues through other legal mechanisms. So that's what we've left with the NTA to sort out, because the designation doesn't really mean much anymore. It used to, but it doesn't do anything. It's just sitting on the map going, this is D31, what does that mean? And so the maintenance issues can be dealt with through other ways. And so we've been looking at how we can do that with the NTA, because it's their responsibility to look after it. So
you're handing it from the council to the Northern Transport Alliance?
They look after any roading issues or, access ways. Yeah. So they've been involved in conversations.
I guess to answer that question, would there be any possible scenarios where you would require a resource consent or what have you in this particular area that a designation would make any difference?
Not really, because you've got the zone rules. So, I mean, it will be commercial zoning. So if anyone wanted to extend or modify their buildings, then that could be dealt with through the building consent rules and the land use rules. Assuming it's a permitted activity, they can do that anyway.
So there's no.
It's really just down to the maintenance of the service lane. So that's the issue with this.
Still going to continue irrespective of the designation?
Yeah, yep, because people will still need to drive on it. Yeah.
Councillor Erin Ross-Cole.
Thank you. That was basically my question. We're not changing what's been maintained. And in fact, that service lane has had a very beautiful partial upgrade by one of the owners. So I think you'll find people can get stuff done between them. So, but yeah.
Councillor Daya.
Right, the same applies to.
I had a question. Can I? To the chair?
Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, my question was actually more not on designation per se and not on the fact that who maintains it. So it's an extension of the question which Councillor Lambert asked, because being in RTC Regional Transport Committee and also listening from constituent, the stories of who maintains what, the service lane will not be maintained by NTA, I can assure you that, because they will say it's not a highway. So we are trying to create more, this, you said it can be done regardless of how many owners take responsibility legally. It should be done as a matter of fact, not legal. Like it is something council's job is to do it. So I think, I'm not reading it right or whatever it is. Functionally, it doesn't work when you are passing it on to NTA. That's my question. Or would it?
It's not council's job. If council doesn't understand.
Council only owns a portion of the service lane. So it is council's responsibility to be a party to any discussions with those landowners. And so when we looked at the makeup of who owns what, there are multiple parties involved in this. So often what we see in terms of development agreements and things is an easement or a legal tool would be the best way for them to agree who pays for what and how that's done. And council would have to be party to that, being a landowner. So it's not that we're fully in charge of making all the decisions. It's really in terms of being party to any discussion. So I haven't got the composition of how much we own compared to the other landowners. But would I be right, Paul, in saying that it's only quite a small portion that council
And it's
owns?
mainly little strips.
Yeah. So I guess that's the point, is that there are tools outside of a designation that are helpful to landowners to find a solution. And as Councillor Wilson-Collins pointed out, landowners have taken upon themselves to actually upgrade it anyway. And I don't know how that cost was shared or divvied up. Maybe they got together, and that's a great solution. But council ultimately still owns a portion of that, so we still have to be involved in the jigsaw. It's a bit complicated, I guess.
Thank you, Catherine. All I wanted was an assurance that it will be maintained with no further gripe coming from those landowners on that issue, because it's the last thing the elected member will like to see. Thank you.
Councillor Lambeth?
Yes, the elephant in the room is these service lanes are provided for council services, sewerage and stormwater. And they will regularly be dug up and maintained by the council. And then we have the squabble with the NTA then reinstating it. They're not there for no reason. They're there not only to provide access for people to get into, but also to run all your services down. So I'm really, really sceptical of this, because now we're going to have two different people battling on who's going to repair the road after the drainage has all been fixed up.
Can I just, one aspect is that the delegate of the requiring authority, KDC as requiring authority, is the general manager, and the general manager on behalf of all the services, infrastructure services, has ticked this one off as such. So one has to accept that the delegate has considered these particular matters as a whole.
So Aaron Wilson, Collins?
Just for this particular service line, yes, it's been dug up quite frequently and recently, but it was all put back rather beautifully and exactly how it was. So I'm not quite sure why there's an issue being raised for this particular service lane. And this particular service lane provides a lot of parking for those businesses. So it has, and a thoroughfare actually through to the other main road. So I think that's, I think that there's a lot more to it, and it's a lot more complicated. And I don't know why we're stuck on it.
Okay, so let's move along. The point is, it doesn't need to be designated, right? We'll move on.
And the same applies to 45.
Okay, next one.
Mr. Chairman, the next aspect deals with the matters that, and I'm not going to go through all the KDC designations. They are in the documents that were sent to you. If one looks at the first one is the municipal offices. The portion that is going to be excluded or uplifted is the portion where the Plunkett rooms are at this particular point in time. So they would be able to carry on as a commercial venue. The park portion and the rest of the municipal buildings remains as designated for KDC.
Excuse me, is the RSA going with that?
The RSA is also outside, taken out of the designation. Right, the next one is Glens Gully as an example. At this point in time, it is a treatment plant, but the access to the treatment plant is not secure, and that is the access that they use at this point in time. But the request is that we add the access to the designation. D13, the same, making sure that the access to the treatment plant at Kaiwaka is secure. That is the present access, but it is not secure this particular way. It secure access. D14 is Mangatarota Rail Village. For some very strange reason, the true area where the sewage treatment plant actually is was excluded from the designation. And you will see that little block with KDC D14 is now added, which is actually where the works are, and the rest of the terrain is the disposal field. D15, again, deals with two aspects. The one aspect deals with the access, to secure the access. Northwest was excluded, was never included. We now include that. D16 is Dargaville Oxidation Pond. After long discussions with infrastructure, you will see the blue line is now going to be the designated area, while it differs a little bit from the red line, which was the previous one. Also at the race, at the stock car race, we have just made the entrance a little bit wider, especially for trucks that have to come in through that particular area.
Question, see where the blue line deviates to the adjacent to the river, is that, whose title is that? Is that privately?
Kaipara Council owned. Right, D17, which is Dargaville Water Purification Plant, very strange that the plant itself was never designated. The tanks were designated, but not the plant. So we expanded so that it actually includes the plant towards the inside the blue line. The next one is the Mangatarota Water Treatment Plant, and this is more an example of how bad our cadastre is, because the yellow area with the red line, that is where the present designation is, which is total divorce from the road. And we had to go back to Linz and get the exact location of that particular property. So we move it to the correct property. And I haven't put that map in, but the same applies to the Koperu treatment plant. The cadastre is way out, and we have to readjust it to the cadastre.
Have you, whose property is that above, and have you consulted with them?
We have not consulted with them because it is outside of their property.
But
And
you're abutting directly
Yep.
onto their boundary.
in terms of the wrong cadastre, we are abutting the neighbour. All that is now happening is we are adjusting the cadastre, so where the true cadastre
It's just
is.
the map points, so it's always been a little bit out of whack.
It's not quite the map because you are doing a new designation.
But the site's still right next door.
I understand that, but technically you're doing a new designation because you're.
No, it's a modification to the existing KDC designation.
But a modification to the existing one is still a new designation.
Change, yeah. So it's just to correct the legalities with the cadastre maps. So have just every time the maps get updated and changed, they've slipped, and for some reason this one has gone sort of backwards from where it should be. So it's just correcting it.
I don't agree with that. It's still interpretation. However, do you think it would be smart to just run this variation past the landowner?
So through the chair, if we would notify the plan, then the landowner can see this and they say if they want, but as Catherine's touched on, it's really correcting an administrative error. The plant is still there, nothing's changing, it's just a
moving the line,
correction to an error.
Yeah.
Right, those were the KDC designations. As I say, the full set of designations is in your documentation. The three questions that I had is, are there any other questions about designations and any instructions that you would like to give me? And I'll take that one in the education one back, and I'll come back with a reply on that. The second question is, are there any changes to the Kaipara designations from council as the consenting authority that I can put to the require council as requiring authority? And the fourth one is one aspect on, and in the report, it was stated that we have gone back to the requiring authorities, well, all of them, and we have accommodated as much as possible of their request. North Power was one that originally has indicated that they want all the conditions to be incorporated into the plan. And when we send it back to them, they say, no, we don't want the conditions to be incorporated. We are of the opinion that it is necessary to have those conditions, which actually deals with height of towers and those type of things, that it is necessary to keep those conditions in the district plan as part of the designation.
Just make one more, I don't know, statement or observation. So what if the owners to that property never wanted a treatment plant to begin with, and then now's their opportunity to go kick up a stink, and we've already put it into process, which then costs council to have to deal with them down the track, as opposed to just consulting them, writing a letter to say this is what we're doing, so that you can gauge that there's going to be any issues before you go down this whole long process?
Yeah.
Makes sense to me that.
I see where you're coming from. I guess what we don't typically do is write letters to landowners every time we're making minor modifications to those designations, because this sort of thing is, as Mike just said before, it's quite administrative. And the thing is, if we do continue with the PDP and notify, every landowner in the district gets doing that. It's thoroughly this, but the designation is already there, so they've been living next to it forever. And if ADC wanted to, we've already got the ability through our designation to do extra in there to, because the point of a designation is to make it's almost like an action pathway around resource consenting. So if we don't have a designation, like we don't for Mangawhai water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plant, they need to go through consent every time. So the benefit for us is that we could put whatever we want in there effectively using an outline plan. And that just happens. It's just the process. So I guess it's, how impacted are they by something that's already there would be my question.
And moving it a metre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions?
If there's no further questions, and that's the end of the open briefing.
Okay, we'll take a lunch break. Come back at 1:30. Cool. Thank you very much, Catherine and Paul.